After 3 seasons of unsuccessfully growing spring stock, I have finally achieved usable, beautiful, sellable stems this time of the year, which is June. Now, this video actually isn't about how you can achieve spring stock, because plenty of people have been able to do that successfully here where I live, which is in zone 7A in New Jersey.
A slight correction, because I had posted my amazing stock on my Instagram stories and got so many questions about what I did differently this year. So I do address some tips that I have a little bit later in this video.
But rather, this video is going to cover 2 parts. We're going to cover some experimentation that I've done with regards to how do we maximize the amount of stock we could fit, which is a lot more than what you would think. And the second piece is around the varieties that are doing well for me this spring. Now, if you're new to my channel, my name is Jessie. I typically focus my videos on the business side of things. Once in a while, I do focus my video on crop specific things, and stock just happens to be one of those flowers that I've been really stubborn about, that I just want to be able to master growing at least once. And it's because I just love it. I think it smells amazing, it looks amazing. There is something about local stock that is just captivating, and even though people like florists and designers can actually buy it from a wholesaler, get it internationally shipped stock, it cannot hold its own against local stock. So for those reasons, I will probably always plant stock and hope to get better at it every single year. So as I mentioned before, this is the first year that I've been able to achieve spring stock. And you can see over here that right now, this is, I would call, we're entering to mid-June. They are blooming. Where I am typically, you would see blooms a little bit earlier if you're growing the tunnel. And this is about the time of year where people are getting them outdoors. But let's talk about spacing and what I did to start these stock. So these stock were started from seed by me back in February, and I typically soil block everything. And one of the realizations I had when I bought plugs for stock was that they commonly double seed cell trays, because stock has about a 55% chance of being a double, which would look like this, but that other 45% produces singles like this. Now, there is a process where you can try to select out singles by observing how the cotyledon leaves are. In the early stages, you have to undergo this process of putting them in a cooler temperature environment. It's a very time-intensive process, which is why I didn't do it. So instead, one of the ways to get around that is to try to plant more stock so that you can increase your chances of doubles. And I do think that there is a place for singles, if not in bouquets, definitely in design work. Now, stock typically will last about 5 to 7 days in the vase. So if you do have singles like this, they are not going to last as long. But going back to what I said earlier, I decided to seed 2 into a single soil block from the epiphany I had when I bought plugs. And you can see that these are doing super, super well. So I actually did a test and control group where I seeded soil blocks with just 1 versus others with 2. And there is no difference in terms of the quality of the stem. You can see that these are good, long, sturdy stems. This one over here has blooms where you can see, this is a leaf over here, but you can see 2 seeded into a single soil block, and it is growing a perfect bloom. And I would say that this is easily over 24 inches, which is a perfect height for something like stock in a bouquet. Now, one of the things that I did over here was I did space them out about 3.5 inches away from each other. Some of them are even more closely spaced. Some of them are a little bit more further apart. But my main takeaway from all of this was I could have probably pushed the spacing even more. I, like most flower farmers, are always trying to push with the spacing, cramming in as many plants as possible into a small space in a way that allows you to still achieve usable, sellable stems without introducing a ton of disease or pests. So one of the most recent videos I did on my Patreon for Patreon members is talking about how there are certain crops that I've come to really like like because of how much you can cram into a single hortanova square. So this over here is an example of Lisianthus. I have always planted 3 into a single square. Each square is 6 by 6 inches. So if you think about it, like you can fit a lot into this area. And so that video was talking about how I'm planning about 75 to 90 days out. I'm looking at buying additional plugs. What are certain crops that I can potentially buy to fit an extra 3 trays on top of 6 trays that are already coming in? And you can see my space. It's not a small space per se, but it is definitely not a big space. And so I wanted to see, hey, like if I have 1 row, how many trays can I fit into that if I am choosing crops that I can really jam together? And so I am beginning to realize that stock might fit into that category. Now, stock is one of those plants that traditionally they recommend that you space 4 inches apart. And again, I have done that with some of the cells being seeded with doubles. So what I'm going to do is I am going to push the envelope for my fall stock to try to put 3 into a single hortanova square. And at the minimum, I think that if you can keep the stock fertilized, if it's being planted into amended soil, it might actually do better for the stock, because when stock is planted close together, it forces them to be a little bit more upright. Stock is typically one and done for most varieties. It grows a single stem versus having side branches. The Quartet series does come back again if you cut it down and there's enough time this season, and it does create those branching side shoots, which would not allow you to have that type of tight spacing. But most stock, again, is just a single stem, which would allow you to do that. You can see here that I've also been practicing a lot of intercropping. So this has been intercropped with onions as well as some mustard greens. This was really a strategy in the beginning of the season because I had something break into this area. It seemed like there was a deer as well as maybe like a bunny rabbit that broke in. And I was trying to deter that critter from eating my stock. And ironically, something was nibbling on the onions. They recovered and my stock was able to do well. But I want to spend a little bit of time talking about why I think I was able to have successful stock this spring versus in prior springs. I have tried to start stock from seed in the spring, did not grow successfully, and in the past 2 seasons, I've always bought in plugs and try to plant them out in early April. Early April is a little bit late, but the struggle that I've had with procuring stock from plugs in the spring is the fact that to me, there's just not enough time to harden them off in a way where if you're not going to use any protection, they're going to be okay in the elements. And that's because when you buy plugs, they're coming to you shipped at a time where it's expected to get them into the ground basically as soon as possible or within a week after receiving. That's just not enough time to harden. So because I started these stock from seed, once they germinated and they had a pair of true leaves, I started taking them outside. And so that meant that they were already exposed to the cold temperatures during the day and had some level of exposure to the cold, because when things are grown in a nice, tightly controlled environment like a greenhouse, the way plugs are being grown, they don't have that level of exposure, and you want to at least give them some more time in the cold before they go into the ground, where it's definitely going to potentially dip below freezing at night. And that's where I lost a lot of my stock in the early spring. When you have these gyrations in temperature and typically nights are still unpredictable, it's before your last frost, that's where that danger is. So I found that by starting my own seed, it didn't matter the variety, I just had a much higher chance of success. That transitions us perfectly into part 2, which is the 4 different varieties that I was experimenting with for spring. Now, I mentioned earlier that I had gotten a successful crop of fall stock last year, and I really believe that that was because I chose the right variety. I chose Quartet, which is a more heat tolerant type of stock. The stock that I have over here is not meant to be heat tolerant. This is actually the first day that we've hit the 80s here in New Jersey this season. It's been a relatively cooler spring, which I think I definitely benefited from a stock point of view. Everything else has been really slow, but it has allowed me, I think, to achieve these wonderful blooms. Now, that being said, I was interested in growing 4 types of stock. In the past, I've only grown iron stock from seed. So this time around, I added cats, stocks with the X, as well as antique pink, to see how they would perform for me. There's a bunch of other stock out there in terms of varieties. I'm actually ordering additional types of varieties that are going to come in plug trays, again, for a fall experiment. But I want to spend a little bit of time talking about what did well for me, because the answer is actually a little bit contradictory to what you would read from the cultivar sheets. Now, believe it or not, I had seeded way more stock than what is here right now. And the reason why there are fewer stock plants, probably about 40 fewer stock plants, is because one of the varieties that I seeded, which is cats, did not do well in terms of germination. It was the last one to germinate, and I would say that the iron, the stocks, and the antique pink were way further along the way, and therefore when I pulled those, or that tray of soil blocks out, the cat stock was just too in its infancy and did not tolerate the cold as well as the others. So this over here is cats, and what I'm finding with cats is that yes, I am starting to get blooms. The stems tend to be longer. They tend to be a little bit thinner, still sturdy. And this is aligned with the cultivar sheets that I've read. But cats is also supposed to be earlier flowering than something like iron. And so this row over here is iron. And I've already cut a couple of iron stems, but you can see that this clearly has been full flowering before the cat. So my personal experience, iron seems to be doing better from a sturdiness perspective. These stems are really thick. From a flowering perspective, these are giving me full heads earlier. And also just the height is good enough for me. I don't need them to be super, super tall. Now, what I have over here is stocks, S-T-O-X. This is a newer hybrid variety. I believe it's a hybrid variety. I saw someone in my cooperative grow it. It looked so good, so I decided to grow it too. Unfortunately, you can see over here, I have 1 double, 2 doubles over here, but the rest are singles. And I don't think this is necessarily a reflection of the variety. I think this is just the luck in terms of the small amount that I had that grew out. It just happens that more than half turn out to be single over here. The last one over here is antique pink, and this is a really pretty white that has like pink interior ruffles. And this one just started flowering for me, but I am finding that these stems are less sturdy. They're a lot thinner. I still think they're totally workable in bouquets. They're totally fine, but you can see that at least from some of the other stems, they're really, really thin. They're a little weak. I don't know how much of a bloom head I'm actually gonna get out of this. So I do think that this is a reflection of perhaps them not doing as well in my particular climate over here. And perhaps I should stick to something like an iron, which is producing really, really great blooms for me. So this is iron pink. This, I believe, is iron blue, which looks more like a violet. And this was actually seed from 2020. So you can see that stock seed can hold for a while. And one of my regrets is I only bought a packet of each. I really should have bought higher quantities because I want to do this experiment again in the fall, if not in the spring. Now, there was one last component to my spring experimentation, and that was when I should put them out. So I mentioned earlier that I was afraid something was gonna eat the stock over here. I was afraid they wouldn't hold up to the cold. None of it was actually true because these are doing really, really well. So I held some stock behind to put into another part of the farm, and those stock we're gonna look at right now. So these stock were planted about 2.5 weeks later into the ground, and this is what they look like. They are not looking good at all. So you can see over here, these are shorter, haven't really started flowering. There's some shade cloth over here because I've got ranunculus and anemones that are on their last legs. So they're a little bit spindly, they're shorter. They just did not take well. And I think a part of it is just they spent a bit of time being seedlings in a soil block. So not that they got root bound, but they probably wanted more nutrition when they got in. They just didn't have as much time as they needed to adjust in the cold weather and put on those strong leaves before the heat came. And again, we didn't even have that hot of a spring, but of course it gets warm and stock does like it on the cooler side. My takeaway from this was that I started stock at the right time, which is early February for me. I should continue to do that. I could probably even push it a little bit earlier, honestly, especially if I was willing to cover and uncover with frost protection, and that I should get them out when I did, which is sometime in mid-March. So the ones that we just saw were put in late March into the ground, and traditionally I have put stock into the ground in early April, which again is a little bit too late because I really haven't had a successful spring crop. So next year I'm going to start a lot more from seed in February and repeat the process and hopefully have good results.
Now it's pretty to look at stock out in the field growing, but I want to show you how they elevate bouquets, especially this time of year, what flowers work well with them. So this spring, I haven't done a ton of videos on my flowers, but I have been growing some stuff that I've never grown before. One of them is delphinium. And so I harvested a bunch of this delphinium last week. They came in a bit early before everything else. And one thing I want to point out is that my delphinium is pretty short, but they're long enough for bouquet use. And I really do love how petite they are and how easy it is to use in a mixed bouquet, because when you grow really great tunnel delphinium, they are massive. They are statement type of flowers and hard to use in a typical type of mixed bouquet. So the way that I achieved this was by mistake. They really struggled overwintering because something nibbled them down. And so they took a while to put on additional leaf growth. But overall, I'm really happy with how they turned out. And you can see how cute these are, how cute this color is. These I bought from plug trays. So I'm really happy with the delphinium. We also had some ranunculus come in, and so this is part of the Elegance series. This is the first time I've grown Elegance ranunculus. I love them. I actually have the quorums up for pre-sale for 2026. I'll put that in the description below for the link if you want that. Part of the challenge of Elegance is that these quorums are a little bit on the pricier side, and you have to typically get these in wholesale quantities without paying an arm and a leg. So I'm offering 50 unit increments. And so you can get them in various colors. Typically, if you're ordering wholesale, you're buying about 500 at once. But look how roughly they are, and look how well they pair with the stocks. And so what we're looking at is anemones as well as the ranunculus as my focals. I also have some anemone quorums too. But I'm pairing them here with the stock, the delphinium, some yarrow is coming in too, and that's it. And it's not a ton of flowers. Some of my sea holly is coming in, so you can see it's adding a little bit of textural interest over here. Let me take out this bouquet for you. This is a ranunculus, stock, delphinium, yarrow, sea holly bouquet. Look how dainty it looks, and I priced this at $25. So there's 2 ranunculus, 2 anemones, a few yarrow stems, 2 stock stems, and 4 delphinium stems. And I just think this looks absolutely stunning. The fact of the matter is I really struggled with achieving what I felt were good structural bouquets when my delphinium were coming in alongside with my ranunculus. And a part of it was just that there wasn't a lot of variety and the ranunculus got lost. But once the yarrow started coming in alongside with the stock, now I felt like I had something that I was proud of putting out there and that customers would really like. So now that I know that I can get the stock alongside with the yarrow, I'm even more motivated to plant this in the spring at a time when I'm gonna have other flowers. But for me, I would actually rather plant stock than something like snapdragons, which I would definitely have thrips pressure right now. And the only pest that I typically deal with stock is the cabbage worm, because it's a brassica. And of course you can use insect netting to mitigate that in a way that you can't do it with thrips, because thrips overwinter in the soil. So I am super proud of these bouquets. I posted on Facebook that they were going to be dropping at the country store tomorrow. I'm going to make a few more bouquets. There's only 2 right now. And I already got comments around, I can't wait. I'm going to go there. So we'll see how these sell, but look how cute they are.
So if you are someone who is as determined as me to be able to grow stock, because this is a tricky crop, I have a whole playlist here of learnings and just other advice and mistakes that I've had from growing stock. So I'm gonna put this up here as well as in the description, and let me know if you have any questions as well as tips on growing stock, and I'll see you in the next video.